Emily woke up ecstatic that morning since it was her first anniversary with her boyfriend Tom. She had a huge surprise prepared for him. They would go camping together. She made sure not to forget anything. No camping supplies could be missing, especially the camping tent. She had to carry a lot of his stuff, but she didn't mind. Emily couldn't wait to get to Tom's house and see his excitement once he heard the plan. She packed everything in her old car's trunk, and in that moment, she fortunately remembered the food she had prepared the night before, so she went back to get it. Once Emily was ready, she tried to start the car. And just like it usually happened, the car wasn't responding. She had to try a couple more times until the car finally started. She arrived at Tom's house pretty soon, and as soon as she saw him, Emily told him what she was planning. And Tom got really excited. He loved the idea of spending such a special day camping together. After eating, they drove to the forest. They were still a few hours away, so they turned on the radio to make the trip more pleasant. Unfortunately, shortly after, a terrifying news bulletin caught them off guard. The authorities were warning people about a dangerous serial killer who had just escaped the state penitentiary, not very far from where they were. However, Emily and Tom wouldn't let that ruin their anniversary, and so they decided to keep going. They reached the forest once it was about to get dark, and so they quickly unloaded everything that was in the trunk and set up their camping tent. Once everything was prepared, Tom went to look for sticks to make a fire while Emily finished setting up the tent. When suddenly, she heard a metallic screech which seemed to come from her car. Emily went to the car to see what was going on, and when she inspected it, she saw it had a huge scratch on it, as if someone had scraped it with something. She didn't remember seeing that mark before, and there was nobody else around. Maybe it was just a wild animal that got startled and scratched it, thought Emily. She went back to the tent, feeling a bit nervous after that event. She wasn't sure about what really happened, and Tom was taking too long to come back. It was all so strange. She thought about looking for him, but the forest was way too dark, and she was afraid of getting lost, so she decided to keep waiting for him. A few minutes later, Emily heard steps. Thinking it was finally Tom, she felt relieved and went out to receive him. But what she saw petrified her in horror. It wasn't Tom, but a tall man of sinister appearance. In that moment, she remembered the news they heard on the radio about a serial killer, and she panicked. Emily had to act fast. She knew that if she didn't try to escape while the man was still far from her, that would be her end. Thus, she rushed to her car as fast as she could. The macabre man followed her, walking at a constant pace. He seemed to be enjoying the panic of his soon-to-be victim. Emily reached her car. Her hands were shaking, making her keys fall to the ground, but she picked them back up and finally managed to open a door. She got into the car and immediately locked the doors. Emily tried to start the car, but it wasn't responding, and in the worst possible moment, she saw in horror how that sinister man was getting closer and closer, and in that instant, she witnessed how that man had a hook instead of one of his hands, while on the other hand, he was holding the severed head of her beloved Tom. She couldn't believe her eyes. Emily desperately cried as she tried to start her vehicle. The key finally made contact and the car responded. Pushing the pedal to the metal, she managed to escape the murderer with a hook, but that night was so traumatic that it became forever engraved in her memory. The fateful night when she lost Tom forever. The murderer with the hook, or Hookman, is a popular urban legend from the United States, which is known all over the world in different versions. It is about a killer who has a hook for a hand and who attacks a couple inside a parked car. It is believed that his legend originated during the 50s and received a lot of media attention when on November 8, 1960, the advice column Dear Abby, very famous at the time, talked about this story. From then on, the story of Hookman has become a pop culture classic, has appeared many times in horror films, and has inspired various movies as well. The basic premise is that there is a young couple hugging in a car with the radio on. Then, a sudden news bulletin reports that a serial killer, who happens to have a hook for a hand, has just escaped from a nearby prison. For different reasons which vary depending on the version, the couple decides to leave the vehicle quickly. And when they return to the car, the murderer's hook is either hanging from the door's handle or lodged into the door. Other versions include a scraping sound on the car's door. Hookman's myth is pretty scary and it has gradually evolved throughout history. However, the essence of the stories is still the same. A disturbed and sadistic individual who attacks defenseless couples when they are in their cars. So, TikTokers, if you are ever with your significant other in a car, always be aware of your surroundings. You never know when the Hookman might strike. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!